Welcome to PBExact Essentials. My name's Chris, and in this video we're going to be unboxing and going through the initial setup for a PBExact appliance. Now, the PBExact appliance that I'm working with today is the PBExact UC60, but this process is going to be very similar across all of the PBExact UC models. So let's go ahead and get started with the unboxing. So here's my PBExact UC60. It just came in the mail. We're going to go ahead and open this up. There should be two boxes, one exterior box, one interior box. And when you open it up, you're going to find a few things. First of all, there's this smaller box inside. And this smaller box contains the power cable as well as the mounting brackets for putting this into a standard 19-inch rack. Now, if you ordered the PBExact UC with any sort of analog or digital connectivity, you'll also find some cables for that connectivity. So in this case, this PBExact UC has a single PRI card, so I have a PRI cable. If you have analog cards, you will receive the yellow Sangoma analog cables as part of the package as well. Also very important, make sure you don't miss it, there is a USB key that is in here for if you ever have to restore this box. So for instance, if a hard drive crashes or if you just want to rebuild it, this will help you to rebuild the box. It comes pre-installed with the latest version so that you can get it all recovered in the event of an emergency or if you just want to rebuild it. Okay, let's take a look at the appliance itself. There's also some marketing collateral as well as a quick start guide in here. Get rid of this box. Okay, so here we have the PBExact UC60. We can see that I have a one-port PRI card right here, but this is where your analog ports would be if you also had analog ports. Or if you're doing a SIP-only system, there won't be any cards right here at all. So on the front we have VGA, we have our console port, we have two USBs, this is for if you want to plug in a keyboard and mouse for instance, and then we have three network ports. When you initially set up the system, you're going to want to plug into the network port that is marked 0 on the PBExact UC, but on other models you will be plugging it in differently, and I'll go through that in just a minute when I'm getting to the actual install of this system. On the back of the device, we have a power switch, power plug, standard power connector, as well as a power switch. Okay, the next thing we want to do is physically connect the PBExact appliance. So we're going to start with the VGA cable. So just take any monitor, plug in the VGA cable right to the front. Next, you'll want to plug in a USB keyboard. And next comes the Ethernet. Now, on the PBExact UC60, I'm going to be plugging the Ethernet cable into the Ethernet port marked 0. If you have the PBExact UC100 or UC300, you're going to want to plug it into the port marked 0, which is on the right-hand side if you're looking at the front of the box, and it's also shaded in gray. And finally, if you have the PBExact UC1000, you're going to want to plug it into port 0. Okay, so my Ethernet's in. Now, for the analog and digital connectivity, you can plug that in now if your analog or digital ports are available. For instance, if I have a PRI card, if I have a PRI, I can plug the PRI directly in. However, if you are migrating off of an older system, you might want to hold off on the digital or analog connectivity until you're actually ready to migrate over to the PBExact appliance. The last step is to plug in the power cord. I recommend turning the toggle switch to off, then plugging in the power cord, and then you can fire it up. Once it's turned on, you should see the display come onto the monitor, and we can move on to the next step. By default, the PBExact gets an IP address from your DHCP server. So the first thing we need to do is figure out what that IP address is, and we can do that right at the console. Now, I'm connected to the console with the console cable. However, this is basically exactly what you would see on the monitor with your keyboard and mouse plugged in. So we want to log in with our default credentials, which is root, and then the password is Sangoma, all lowercase. Okay, so we log in, and right off the bat we can see that the IP address of this system is 192.168.200.139. So the first thing that we want to do is just make sure that we can connect to that on both SSH as well as through our GUI. So for SSH, you want to open up PuTTY and do a new connection, SSH connection to the IP address that your PBExact was given by DHCP. So in my case, it's 192.168.200.139. Go ahead and press enter. Say yes to the security alert, and here we have our login screen. Let me make this bigger. Here we go. So let me pull this one away. We're going to log in again as root and then Sangoma. And there we are. We're connected via SSH. For the GUI, there's two different ways that you can connect. You can connect with HTTP on port 2001, or you can connect with HTTPS. So for HTTP, we do http://192.168.200.139, substitute your own IP address, :2001, and that's going to bring up our initial setup page. We can also do HTTPS ://192.168.200.139, advanced, proceed, and once again we're brought to the initial setup screen. So let's get started with the initial setup. I'm going to start with admin and give it a password. And then you're going to want to put in an email address. This is for admin notifications and whatnot. Go ahead and click Create Account. And we're brought to the PBX admin dashboard. So there's a few icons that you can see right off the bat. We've got PBX administration, we've got our user-based control panel, our operator panel, and then we've got get support. So for our purposes, we want to log in and administer the PBX. So I'm going to click on PBX administration, and I'm going to enter in the credentials that I just put in the previous screen. And click continue. So when you first log in, you get the setup wizard. The first step of the setup wizard is your time zone. Select your time zone from the list. In my case, I'm Pacific time, so America, Los Angeles is correct. And then email address, you can give your system its own email address right here. I'm just going to take the default though. We're going to say next. The next step gives us the option of entering in some extensions. So we can basically pre-populate a certain number of extensions. You can get a starting extension, so we'll say 4,000, that's fine. I'll just take the default. Extension count 60. I'm actually going to bump that down to 20. I don't quite need to create 60 extensions. And then shared email domain, if you say yes, you can basically say email domain as @company.com, whatever your company's domain is, and then when you create your users, it will assume that all of your users are basically in this same domain. If you have a PBExact installation where people's email addresses are going to be different, you probably just want to set shared email domain to no. Click next to go to the next step of the wizard. So here we have laid out in a table 20 extensions. These are the extensions that I put into the last step, or the number of extensions that I put into the last step. So we start at 4,000 and we go up to 4,019. Now from here you can put people's names and an email address and then a voicemail password, make them an administrator, yes or no, and if you already have DIDs in the system, you can select a direct dial DID that rings directly to each extension. So in my case, I'm just going to take all the defaults other than the first one here, and I'm going to go ahead and say next. The next step is another wizard to set up the Sangoma Smart Firewall, and this is a really good idea to make sure you set up properly, even if your system is behind your own corporate firewall. So the Sangoma Smart Firewall is responsive. It allows small amounts of packets to come in from unknown sources to basically scrutinize them and see if they are able to authenticate successfully. And if they do successfully authenticate, it sort of opens the floodgates and lets those packets in. And if they don't successfully authenticate, it blocks out those IP addresses for a certain amount of time. So let's go ahead and go through the wizard. On the first step, we're just going to say continue. And now we say next. And the first question is, should the client you're using be trusted? In my case, it's 192.168.200.4. That's the computer that I'm using right here. So we'll go ahead and say yes. The next step is, should the network that you're in be trusted? Which in my case, it's 192.168.200.0/24. Basically, if I say yes here, I'm allowing any phones and devices in the 192.168.200.0/24 network to connect freely to the free PBX phone system. So basically, if you have a trusted network, go ahead and say yes. The next step says enable responsive firewall. Let's go ahead and do that as well. Yes. And now, do we want to automatically configure *IP settings? So this is going to be for your NAT settings, right? It's going to detect your external IP address, it's going to detect your internal IP address, and it's going to set NAT appropriately based on that information. We're going to go in and double check, and I'll show you where you can add additional networks if you have multiple subnets in your organization. So for now, we're just going to say yes, and move on to the next step. Okay, so thank you for installing PBExact. Now this is the SipStation free trial wizard. I'm going to skip that for now. We will get back to SipStation in a later video. And here we are brought to the basic dashboard of PBExact. So what can we do here? Extensions, configure your IVR, configure your inbound routes, music on hold, ring groups, time conditions, endpoint manager, advanced mode, or restart that wizard that we had gone through a couple steps ago. So the basic mode is good for a beginner if you're just getting used to PBExact and you want to sort of just get in here and configure a few things. This gives you most of the basic options that you need to touch in order to get the system fully operational. However, if you want to switch into advanced mode, you can do it in two places. Up here in the upper left, you can click advanced mode, or you can click advanced mode right here as one of the buttons of the basic mode interface. So we're going to go ahead and switch over to advanced mode. And here we have the PBExact dashboard. Okay, so this tells us how many trunks, how many users are online or offline. It gives us some statistics about uptime and load averages. It tells us, green and red check marks if everything is good or if there's any problems with the system. Also, if there's any system alerts such as packages that need to be updated and things like that, those will show up down here below the system overview section. And the first thing that I want to do in advanced mode is I want to give this system a static IP address in my network. So let's go ahead and go to Modules, and we're going to go to System Admin. And then in System Admin, I'm going to click on Network Settings. In Network Settings, we can see a list of all of our interfaces. In my case, I just want to modify ETH0, and right now it's set to DHCP, so I'm going to select Static instead. And I'm going to give it a static IP address of 192.168.200.30, and I'm going to keep all of the other information the same. Go ahead and save that interface. Save and apply. Since I changed the IP address of the PBExact, I now need to switch over to the other IP address, so I'm going to put that up here in my browser, and I'm going to log right back into the system. When you make changes to the system, you're going to see a red Apply Config button show up in the upper right-hand corner. Essentially what that does is it queues all of your changes and then only applies all of the changes that you've done after you hit Apply Config. So you don't have to hit it after every change that you make, but you should hit it periodically if you're making a lot of changes, just so that you don't accidentally lose all of the work that you did. I'm going to go ahead and hit Apply Config now, and it's going to reload the system. Okay, so there's just a couple of more initial steps that you want to go through when you're setting up your PBExact. The first thing you want to do is add any additional networks into your *SIP settings. So you go to Modules and *SIP settings. It's on the far right underneath the settings section. And here it should already have detected your external and internal IP address. But if you have additional networks internally, you want to click Add Local Network Field and go ahead and add your additional network. So for instance, if I had 192.168.1.0/24, I would add it here and click Submit. Along those same lines, you also want to whitelist your trusted networks in the intrusion detection settings. So let's go over to Modules, System Admin, and then we're going to click on Intrusion Detection. So the intrusion detection system is a way to block out people that are trying to do brute force hacking attempts against SIP, against your SSH server, any ports that you happen to have open to the outside world. It's not a matter of, if someone's going to try to penetrate your system on those ports, it's how often are they doing it, right? Because it happens all the time. So what the intrusion detection does is it allows you to set parameters for how many times someone can unsuccessfully authenticate before we block them out of the system. So we have our ban time, our max retry time, and our find time. Essentially what this means is the max retry is how many times they can fail to authenticate. So I'm going to bring that down from 8, I'm going to say 3, within our find time, which is, I'm going to put to 300 seconds or 5 minutes. Then we're going to ban them for 3,600 seconds or 1 hour. So what I'm saying here is if someone tries to authenticate unsuccessfully 3 times within 5 minutes, we're going to lock out their IP address for an hour. But there's some devices on your network, such as your local network, that maybe you have a phone that has a bad password or something and it's just going to keep trying and you don't want to lock that phone out. So we also want to whitelist our trusted networks. And our trusted networks in my case are 192.168.200.0/24 and 192.168.1.0/24. Go ahead and click Submit to save your intrusion detection settings. Finally, let's take a closer look at our firewall settings. If we go to Modules, we can find Firewall under Connectivity. So click on Firewall. And one thing that you need to know about the PBExact firewall is that it does have a safe mode. You can read about it right here, but essentially the safe mode allows you to prevent any potential screw-ups. So for instance, if you accidentally lock yourself out of the PBExact, which I've done myself, it's prone to happen. If you reboot PBExact twice within 5 minutes, the firewall is delayed from starting for 5 minutes before it actually fires up. So basically you're saying, I'm going to reboot it twice, and if I reboot it twice, I have a 5-minute window to fix any of the firewall settings to allow me to gain access once again once the firewall actually restarts, or the firewall service actually restarts. So the first thing I want to click on is over here under Zones. And I want to click on the Networks tab, because remember I have that extra network, the extra LAN network that I want to add in here. I'm going to say 192.168.1.0/24, and I'm going to click the plus button and select Trusted. So I'm basically telling the PBExact, if anyone's connecting from this subnet, go ahead and let them pass. This is a trusted network. Once that has been done, I want to click on Interfaces, and to actually enable the firewall, you want to select the external zone. So basically what you're saying here is I want to treat ETH0 as if anything outside of ETH0 is external, and I want to process firewall rules as if those devices are external. Now anything that I have in trusted networks is still going to be trusted and it'll be allowed to flow through, but this is going to scrutinize any other traffic that tries to come in through that interface. So go ahead and hit the check mark there. And in my case, I'm not actually using ETH1 or ETH2 on this box, so just for security's sake, I'm going to reject all connections on those interfaces. So I'm going to say reject on ETH1 and hit the check mark. And reject on ETH2 and hit the check mark. Now, if you do have services that you want to open up to the outside world, you can do that under the Services section. So if you click Services, you see here's SSH. So for instance, if I wanted to open up SSH to the outside world, I'd want to make sure that external is selected here. I'd very highly recommend not opening SSH to the outside world if you can. Same thing with web management, user control panel. Some of these are set to external by default, but most of them are not. There's also extra services. Some of the less commonly used services are under the extra services tab. And you can also add custom services. So if there's anything custom running on here, you can create rules to open those ports up through the firewall as well. But that's about it. For now, I'm just going to go right back to the dashboard because the firewall configuration is complete. Okay, so that's it for the initial setup of the PBExact UC appliance. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and we'll see you in the next one.